Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. This is Jessop's Journal. Dr. Cannon, great to see you.
Great to see you, Doug.
Let's go chat.
You bet.
Dr. Cannon, thanks for coming. It's time to sign into Jessop's Journal.
Well, thank you. I will.
Hi, I'm Doug Jessop. In this episode of Jessop's Journal, I have Dr. Mark Cannon, all the way from Chicago, Illinois, coming here. So, number one, thank you, Dr. Cannon.
Well, thank you for having me.
You betcha. So, what shall I call you today?
Call me Mark.
So, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Nebraska,
Okay.
and I went in 1978 to Chicago to do my residency at Children's Memorial Hospital.
Residency in what?
Pediatric dentistry.
Whoa, okay, let's back up for a second. Okay, how in the world did you get into dentistry and why pediatric?
Well, because I was very involved in microbiology, and believe it or not, dentistry revolves around microbiology. Everything we deal with is bacterial driven. And I got recruited into pediatrics by one of the greats of pediatric dentistry who sat down with me and said, "Young man, have you ever considered pediatric dentistry? Because we have three things we have to do. We have to do research, we have to teach, and we have to practice. If we don't practice, we don't know what to teach. If we don't do research, we don't know what to develop to teach and to practice." It made sense. And it allowed me, I like to use my hands to do things. It allowed me to do things with my hands and be artistic and creative. Especially in aesthetics, but at the same time I could still pursue research and continue to teach and try to find out what we don't know and what we have misunderstood. And because of that, I have this history in teaching of always telling students that what I teach you today will be wrong tomorrow. And never believe what's written in textbooks, because by the time they have it in a textbook, it's dated. And we see that so much today with new research coming out all the time on COVID-19, often contradicting things you just read a few weeks earlier.
Do you remember your first patient?
Yes, actually I do. One of the first patients,
Tell
I
me.
do. It was a gentleman who had a lot of medical issues, who had a lot of anxiety issues also. And because I had treated him in such a manner, the faculty noticed it. That's one of the reasons I got recruited into pediatric dentistry. They said, well, you know, you really went out of your way to help this patient who had these medical compromises and this fear and anxiety. And to this day, my practice right now is strongly concentrated on special needs individuals. I see a lot of patients every day. I see a lot of patients with autism. I see a lot of patients who are cerebral palsy. I see a lot of kids who are oncology patients, cardiac patients, you name it, all children with severe needs all day. I
gotta imagine that'd be a little draining, you know?
The children are not draining at all, and the gratitude you get, and the fact that you often feel so satisfied having a little 3 or 4-year-old child that has a lot of problems and in pain, and you get rid of those problems, you get them out of pain, and so often they're so grateful. The biggest issue has always been dealing with the parents.
Yeah, okay,
It's
good guy. I can
always
see what you're saying.
and everyone will always tell you the biggest issue is always dealing with the parents.
Because the little kids are going, hey, you know, I got pain and here's this guy that's gonna help me.
They love coming in.
Yeah.
We have everything for them. They watch TVs, they lay back, they watch TV on the ceiling. We provide them with a lot of things. They love to come in, and one of the things at the end of their visit, they get a nice little xylitol sucker.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah, they love that.
So apparently during World War II, there was this village in Finland, I think it was.
Yes.
You know, that they'd somehow wanted to sweeten their teeth, their food, and they used like a birch tree or something. I don't know how in the world they came up with that. And then they come to find out later after the war that nobody had cavities over there.
Well, yes, xylitol actually has a long history with mankind.
Oh, really?
And development of Homo sapiens. In fact, even our teeth, there's some great books you can read on this, like Peter Unger's Bite. Our teeth have developed to crush down tubers, which are big underground plants in the middle of Africa. And by crushing them down, we get all those fibers. And it's from breaking down those fibers, we get xylitol, mannitol, and D-xylose, which is very important from a health benefit. In fact, some great research has been done on this. Back in the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, they published a study where they looked at the bacteria in the guts of kids from the European Union, which is similar to the United States,
Right.
compared it to children living in rural Africa,
Okay.
and found complete difference between the type of bacteria we have. Now this correlated with all the research finding like autism is very rare. In rural Africa, it's very rare. In like rural areas of South America, you just don't find autism. And I mentioned,
Really?
I see a lot of patients who are on the spectrum. And autism, you know, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects behavior, social behavior, and also the gut, how your gut responds to things. Well, what they've shown in these studies is like the famous study called the Burkina Faso study, is that these children have bacteria that can break down these basic, quote, indigestible fibers into very good sugars, of which one is xylitol.
Okay.
Now, xylitol occurs a lot in, like you mentioned, birch trees, also in strawberries, also in blueberries, raspberries, and one of my favorites, cauliflower. So I just made some sauteed cauliflower last night in coconut oil and seasoned it up good with Cholula. It's delicious, but that's high in xylitol.
Really?
And xylitol is very beneficial because it not just prevents cavities, it prevents gum disease. It inhibits the bacteria that produce gum disease. And don't forget, there's a key bacteria that causes gum disease. And this one bacteria, we'll call it PG for now, but PG opens up the connections between your cells and lets other bacteria in. That's why when you have gum disease or gum swells, they swell up because they get invaded by all these other bacteria. Some of them are actually friendly commensals, bacteria that are actually not bad. They're just passengers coming with us all the time. And that causes this chronic inflammation that predisposes you to things like COVID-19 mortality, morbidity. And that's well published, by the way. There's been recently 3 publications on it. But the other thing is, they get in the bloodstream and they get into your arteries. They actually colonize within the center of your artery, causing atherosclerosis. That's why we now know that that same bacteria not only causes gum disease, but atherosclerosis, ischemic heart disease. But wait, it does something else. It opens up the blood-brain barrier.
Really?
And that's why all the current Alzheimer's research shows that you can create Alzheimer's in mice by taking this bacteria, squirting it in their mouth, this human bad bacteria, PG, and they'll develop all the hallmark symptoms of Alzheimer's with, you know, you hear about the beta amyloid plaque,
Right.
the entangled protein, the tau protein. You develop all that histologically. So this is why there's a direct correlation between these bacteria, the severity of your periodontal disease, your gum disease, and heart disease, and also Alzheimer's.
Okay, so let me see if I get this. So there's this bad bacteria, okay, that is basically attacking everything from your brain to your gums and everything in between.
Yes, it uses the same mechanism.
Okay, so the question becomes is how the heck do we stop that?
Well, fortunately, it's susceptible to probiotics, good probiotics, and also a prebiotic. We talked about that prebiotic,
Right.
xylitol.
Okay.
Xylitol, again, is a naturally occurring sugar that's found in plants and fibers. And we developed with it. Now, here's the whole story about that, because we have to talk about how we evolved.
Yes.
This is some of the most exciting research out there, is we co-evolved with our bacteria.
Okay.
So Homo sapiens as a species, we have a specific set of bacteria that's different from any other species. We don't have the same bacteria as a great ape. You know, the same bacteria as a chimpanzee. We co-evolved separately. We have common ancestors, but we have a different set. Well, this is important because our bacteria, they provide for us our immune response. They moderate our immune response, and they provide essential nutrients. They provide vitamins for us. In fact, we've been calling xylitol vitamin X. That there's really not 13 vitamins, there's actually 14 vitamins.
Okay. With
vitamin X being one of the most important vitamins you can have. It actually is utilized in the same pathway, it's part of the metabolites from vitamin C. So here's an irony of all this, is because xylitol is high in plants, are often high in vitamin C. So getting those benefits from those plants, you are also getting benefits from xylitol.
So when mom says you're supposed to eat your fruits and veg, she wasn't kidding.
No, she wasn't kidding.
There's one thing that I know that you are kind of known for, and it's this research with autism.
Yes.
Okay, now autism, I won't get into it too much, but it's a personal project for me. I've done a number of stories on that. And so for the people that don't understand what autism is, give me a Reader's Digest version of what autism is.
Well, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder where there's changes in learning, cognitive, and social skills, but it's almost always combined with a gut disorder at the same time.
Really?
Now, what is interesting is there's been great research on this. If you go back just a year ago, published in Frontiers in Psychiatry, they did a review of all the studies done on the gut of kids with autism, individuals with autism. It's a very specific gut bacteria, very specific. 2 years prior to that, published in Medical Sciences, another article. 3 years ago, published in Scientific Reports, a great article showing that you could, by taking a sample of the saliva with the bacteria, diagnose autism with an accuracy of 96.3% just from that sample of bacteria, because they are so unique.
Okay, then that begs the question is, okay, you find this particular bacteria, okay? Is there a age at which this starts developing, and can you turn back time?
Yes. In fact, that's why there's famous research on doing fecal matter transplants, like at the University of Arizona, Dr. James Adams and others, where they've had phenomenal success in treating kids with autism, by giving them a whole new set of bacteria, and their success rate is really very impressive, how they have solved gastric problems and neurological problems.
So you've talked about autism, and you talked about this gut bacteria type diagnosis. It's amazing to see what the results were in there. So, but there's a lot of people that get afraid of certain things, and I think it's kind of natural when, to be afraid of things that you don't know about. Do we know what doesn't cause autism?
Well, there's been, accusations like about vaccines and all that, but it's well published in like the Journal American Medical Association, where they have gone through tens of thousands of children, and they have found no change in the rate of autism between those who have been vaccinated and those who have not been vaccinated. So I think that has been, and many top researchers, neuroscientists like Dr. Derek McFabe and others, will say that's been such a red herring. And what it does is it deflects from the true research. And I have to tell you, there's so many things we do know. We do know that certain bacteria are associated with autism. We've known that for years.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, positively, strongly associated. Now, just recently, if I can tell you about my own research.
Please.
What we did was took, for my practice, 30 young people that have absolutely, they're autistic, mostly nonverbal, and we compared them over a period of 120 days after interventions with a prebiotic, xylitol, followed by a probiotic. We also compared them to 30 completely healthy children in my area, but most importantly, I went down to an area of Colombia in South America that is a blue zone, and we compared them to those kids. What we did is we took samples of their saliva and we studied all the viruses, yeast, mold, bacteria, archaea, anything that was growing, but did something even more. We checked for all the functional groups. Now you might say, what does that mean? Well, there's something called the KIG orthology, where you can look at everything that's being produced by the RNA in the system. So we look at all the enzymes, the peptides, anything that RNA can code for. What we found was shocking. We never assumed we'd find this much information. It was mind-blowing. It took artificial intelligence run by Dr. Guru Banavar, famous guy who developed Watson for IBM, at the New Mexico, Los Alamos National Laboratories using supercomputers. We had phenomenal individuals who were part of the team. I was the lead investigator, but we had all these great people. And we found all these different bacteria that are upregulated in kids with autism and others that are downregulated, and the reverse in people who are totally healthy, normal, healthy kids from South America, where you could just talk to so many of them, never find anyone with autism. They're just all extremely verbal and social and friendly and everything. And we found these different groups, and we found something we didn't ever dream we'd find. And this is earth-shattering. This should have been front page news.
Okay, well, I'll give you a shot. Give me some front page news.
It's bidirectional. You know, like when you hook up a printer with a bidirectional cable, USB cable, it goes both directions. The host, us, the person, regulates the bacteria, and they regulate back. So we're like a spaceship. We're flying through space, but inside of us, we have these bacteria that are engineers, they're pilots, captains, they do all the stuff. They do all the maintenance of keeping our immune system working. They help provide engine fuel for our engine. We couldn't fly without these guys. That's why germ-free animals are so weird and different. And they've always known this. When they made germ-free rats and germ-free mice, everything was wrong with them.
Well, you know, it's interesting because there's a phrase that and my kids tease me about this, okay? I do a lot of gardening and everything. And my concern that I look at is I say, you know what? Kids today, now I sound like an old guy, but kids today need to eat more dirt.
Yes, they do.
Okay, and you know what I'm saying is the fact that if everybody sanitizes so much, you're getting rid of the good stuff as much as the bad. Is that kind of, am I on the right path?
Yeah. And that is a little scary during a pandemic, but we have to get to the pandemic soon.
Yeah.
So going back to that, we also found something else. We may have found the mechanism by which Homo sapiens developed intelligence.
Really? Okay.
And that is even more fascinating to me because just a few days ago in the journal Neuron, they published how levels of serotonin increase the number of cells that later become your neurons in the neocortex, which is what has made us humans. Okay. Giving us the ability to write music and books and enjoy art and create jewelry. And it's funny because during certain times recently, by recently I mean like during the last 80,000 years, there's been some major climate change resulting in major differences in our diet. We went to different food that changed our bacteria to making more serotonin. And we now know that anxiety, depression is because we don't get enough serotonin from our gut bacteria. And in fact, there's even one that eats the serotonin to cause anxiety, depression, and is directly related to anxiety, depression. And that's well proven, by the way, some great research on that. But this is where we get back to we need to have our good bacteria, but they need to have their prebiotics, such as xylitol. We talked about xylitol preventing gum disease, Alzheimer's, preventing cardiac issues. These are all things that are comorbidity factors and comortality factors for COVID-19. So yes, we've got to get back to having our xylitol, as we call it, vitamin X, because that's so important to our whole system, our immune system.
Utah has one of the highest autism rates in the country, and they're not quite sure why. You know, I don't know if it's environment, I don't know if it's the altitude, if it's, you know, a homogeneous population group, but is there any kind of research that shows in simple terms what causes autism?
In a simple term, during brain development, you're short some neurotransmitters, some basic chemicals that tell the brain what to do. Without those chemicals, the brain does not develop in the normal fashion. There's also things that trigger destruction of the brain cells, the neurons, and it's our own cells doing it. Within the brain, there's something called microglia, and these are cells that will prune away defective brain cells so new ones can be created in new brain networks.
Okay.
In autism, those microglia cells are activated. Now, what activates them is actually a byproduct coming from the gut, from the wrong bacteria in the gut. And that byproduct is a propionate, and it used to be used as a food preservative.
Oh, really?
And you might still find it in certain food items. Now, McDonald's, a couple years ago, and this was headlines, removed that preservative from their food products.
Wow. Okay, that's a new one. So
Yeah.
the question, I guess, becomes is, okay, you've had this, you now have a child with autism, okay? And basically the neural connections did not develop correctly. Is there a way to connect that back? Is there a way to try to figure out, to get your kid back?
Well, here's the last big surprise from our study, something we did not expect to have at all. The 30 kids that were autistic, badly autistic, 6 of them started to become quite verbal and had completely changed.
Really?
6 of the 30. Now it's 9 of the 30. Now, unfortunately, we did not anticipate that, so we had nothing in place to scientifically measure it. We just simply had, how verbal they were, their behaviors, but we didn't have all the social scales in place. If I were to do that study again, I would have had that in place first, but we never anticipated that. In those ones, that at that one initial point, 120 days, those 6 kids, they had a big shift in their bacteria, which we have documented, and we are publishing that big shift that had occurred. This is what they're showing in those treatments that they've done, like at University of Arizona and also at the Karolinska Institute. So yes, there is hope. There is hope to try to get things back. Will you get it all the way back? God only knows. I don't think so. But at University of Arizona, some kids have returned back to normal in social functions and so on. And there was a probiotic study just published like 2 weeks ago, a big clinical trial, double-blind, state-of-the-art clinical trial out of Italy, where they used probiotics. And they found there was, quote, a subset of patients that had a significant improvement in their core cognitive skills.
Wow.
Now, that is huge,
Oh,
because that's what we
massive.
found, too.
Yeah.
It's a subset.
Was there a particular age group that seemed to have the highest impact?
Yes, it was actually the 6 to 9-year-olds had the highest impact.
Okay.
But the youngest in the study was age 6.
So basically it's saying the sooner you can get on this, the better.
Yes.
Okay, so if you, and I'm not asking you to give medical advice here or anything, but if you were to have a child that you are concerned about.
Oh, I tell them right away. I tell them, in the office, I tell all my parents, xylitol is a neuroprotectant. We know it's a neuroprotectant. It's a strong anti-inflammatory. It protects the brain. It prevents overgrowth of these bad bacteria. It turns you back more to a normal set of a microbiome because it's a strong prebiotic. I tell that every day.
Okay, so where would you find the sources of xylitol? What would you tell, hey, you need to start eating this or do this?
Yeah, well, I always go through the natural foods that
Okay.
will contain the xylitol, but I always have them supplement with a xylitol toothpaste. We use xylitol suckers. I mentioned that
Yeah.
to you before. That's a huge thing and rewarding too, by the way, because you need to have something they really like and they love it. They all love their xylitol suckers.
Yeah.
Use it as a reward for good behavior, for everything, and at the same time, we're helping protect their developing brain.
Okay, so you had talked about autism, but you'd also talked about gut issues. Okay, I happen to know, a number of people that I've done, stories on and such. And one of the things that I found was interesting, and I don't know if it's just me observing or if there's any kind of data. Is there any correlation between autism and eating disorders?
Absolutely.
Really? Tell me,
Yeah, in
tell me more.
fact, in autism, it's really interesting. They've actually done gut biopsies, and those gut biopsies, they'll find that certain enzymes are present, but they've been turned off. And that's because you have, again, it's this bad balance of bad bacteria. They do all sorts of things. If you get a bad infection, for instance, called the SIBO, the small intestine bacterial overgrowth, if you get that, you can become lactose intolerant. You cannot often have milk afterwards. So the body, there's a bidirectional control.
Right.
And if you do something that the body says, oh, I got to fix this problem, what can I do? Sometimes it does something self-destructive, whether it's activating the microglia in the brain or it's shutting off important enzymes in your gut. One of the things we found with kids with autism is that they're very short a certain group of bacteria called the Rothia genus, and that is the bacteria that break down gluten for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what breaks down gluten for everybody.
Wow.
I mean, xylitol has all these benefits. Now, recent research shows that xylitol prevents the attachment of the SARS-CoV-2 virus to cells. And I can tell you, the research I've done at Northwestern, at our biocriolab lab, we had cells sent to us from Utah State University, that were infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And we did the imaging. We have all these phenomenal high magnification imaging showing that the virus did not penetrate the cell wall. And the reason being is, on the outside of the cell wall, there's a protein. Attached to that protein is a sugar protein. And the sugar that holds it there is D-xylose. Xylose is a cousin. It looks almost exactly. They could be like brothers to xylitol. Now, when you put xylitol in the system, SARS-CoV-2 virus tries to occupy the space that D-xylose is at, which is what makes SARS-CoV-2, like all the beta coronaviruses and all the other viruses, they evolved to use the same attachment mechanism. They use the same attachment mechanism to cells. You block it with xylitol, it becomes a decoy target.
So basically it bounces off.
Well, it hits onto the xylitol. And the xylitol is broken down back to D-xylose by a simple enzyme reaction to replace any D-xylose that the SARS-CoV-2 virus is knocking off. That's why you see patents coming out and many a nasal spray coming out doing the same thing that this one does, preventing the spread of the infection by just applying vitamin X up the nose.
Thanks so much for coming on. There's the last question I like to ask people is, this show's called Jessop's Journal, and Restico makes all my journals, and they have this really cool hashtag that I really like. It says, leave your mark. So, Dr. Mark Cannon, how do you want to leave your mark?
I've been leaving my mark. I've been out there educating, doing research, informing people. I spend my day every day telling patients, in fact, they love the lectures. They go, I can't wait to hear your next lecture when it comes to health and what to eat. And I believe that my job as a doctor, going back to the Greek definition, is to educate. And I educate my students, I still teach. I teach pediatric dentists. I teach at many programs. I lecture at many meetings. And I try to reach out to all the patients and everyone to say, hey, go back to a healthy lifestyle. Go to your healthy foods. Use your vitamin X. Do everything you can to make your kids healthy, because that's the mark on the world, right? I have 5 kids, 3 grandkids. They're healthy. I want to keep them healthy.
One grandpa to another, I thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you, sir, very much.
And then there are other people we want to thank. That guy right there, Ed. Ed is
Ed?
the guy that makes us look good and sound good. And of course, you know, we've been doing the hand sanitizing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with the folks from Five Wives. I love the folks at Spry, the mouth spray. You know, dry mouth. It's my broadcaster's
really well.
friend.
No, this
Broadcaster
works
friend.
really well with special needs patients.
Oh, really?
Patients who are like wheelchair bound and you have a hard time, or cerebral palsy, or maybe they have behavioral issues. You can always take this spray and just spray in the mouth several times a day. And it just helps so much with the inflammation and getting rid of that.
Yeah.
This is one of our go-tos in facilities. In fact, quite frankly, you know, nursing home facilities should be using this in the mouth and using this up the nose and try to save those people.
We've got the hand sanitizing, but you wash your hands. Have you thought about, okay, not kidding, washing your nose. This is really, really good stuff. And then, of course, Taylor Cooperative helps make me look good with the clothes, and, you know, JW Custom Hats, because I am that TV hat guy. Here's the thing I want people to remember. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. With another entry into Jessop's journal and Dr. Mark Cannon, I'm Doug Jessop, ABC4 News.